and we'll kick off with our next agenda item around Gypsy and Traveller, people and communities. Are you there, Bernard?
Yeah, I'm there. I'd just like to start by introducing myself. So my name's Bernard, and my role is I work in mental health and suicide prevention for the Gypsy and Traveller community at Leeds GATE. Thank you.
That's great. And Tom, do you want to come next then?
Yeah, my name's Tom Gaffney. I'm the services manager at Leeds GATE. So I kind of oversee a lot of the one-to-one support and advocate. I can never say the word advocacy that we offer. I'm going to change that word.
We've just employed a member of staff who can't say nomadism. Like, I think we need to give people a speech test before they join.
I say the word about 20 times a day, but advocacy. There you go.
And then Rachel, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I'm Rachel. I'm the Director of Development at Leeds GATE, which means that I develop a lot of like funding bids and projects and then pass them on to other people to deal with. But I've had quite an involvement in the suicide prevention project and deliver quite a bit of our training. So today we've kind of incorporated some of our like training, but from a mental health and suicide perspective to share today.
Fab. So I don't know who's going first, but if you want to take it away, we've got a load of people who are eager to hear.
Okay, I'll just get the slides up for you, Bernard. Sorry, just a sec. Can you see that?
Yeah, we can see it. You might want to make it a bit bigger. Yeah, there you go. Got it. Thank you.
So, hi, my name is Bernard. My role at Leeds GATE is I'm currently a mental health and suicide prevention worker at Leeds GATE Gypsy and Traveller Exchange. Leeds GATE is a member-led organisation working with the Gypsy and Irish traveller community across West Yorkshire. My mental health role covers Leeds and my suicide prevention role covers West Yorkshire. Leeds GATE run two main groups, the community team. They run youth groups, education and men's groups and women's groups. And the team in our services team and the other team is our services team that covers the advocacy and support. We currently have 800 members signed up to our organisation, and this is growing. Leeds GATE's overall aim is to improve quality of life for gypsies and travellers. Most staff are also gypsy and traveller. I was a member, a volunteer, and I'm currently a trainee at Leeds GATE, but I'm also from the community myself. Under this project, there's also Claire that works around mental health and suicide prevention. So members have the opportunity of working with a male from the community or a female from the community, somebody that's from the community and somebody that's not from the community. We deliver regular outreach to Kirklees, Calderdale, Bradford and Wakefield. Some of this outreach work has involved developing new partnerships to help reach gypsies and travellers. We currently offer one-to-one appointments to people who identify as possible risks to suicide. From the members we have worked with, we have seen that the most common risk factors are financial difficulties, poor health outcomes, isolation and unstable relationships.
Okay, I'm going to cover a bit of the background about who Gypsy and Travellers are, but only if people haven't heard it before. So if you've seen the film Roads from the Past and know a bit about Gypsies and Travellers and their history, can you put your hand up? So put your hand up on the like the little icon reaction if you've already seen it.
think we've only got 2 with their hands up there.
All right, cool. I thought I was missing something then.
No.
Okay, cool. So if you have seen it before, which is only 2 people, I've watched it several times and do get something new from it each time. But so basically, want to share with you a short film made by Travellers Times, which is a national organisation. It's an animation that gives you primarily a history of gypsies and travellers, but it helps sort of ground our understanding really in our what we share and what we have in common. So I'll just
I think you might have to stop sharing and reshare with sound.
Yeah, well, that might be the case. I made sure I shared with sound when I started sharing, but for some reason you often have to go back in, don't you? When you, it's a bit bizarre. Any good?
We can't see it yet, Rachel. So you're not sharing again, I don't think. I can't see it anyway.
If you can't get it up, I can just share it from YouTube on mine if you want, Rachel.
Understand this story now, it's
Got it
important
now.
to go back to the
Okay,
beginning.
start from the beginning.
Gypsies, Roma and travellers are 3 words that stand for a lot of different people. Just like with everyone, Gypsy, Roma and traveller people have things in common with each other, and some things that are different. But to understand this story now, it's important to go back to the beginning. Living in one place is a recent thing. People were nomads for 99% of our history, travelling around to survive. Then about 10,000 years ago, something changed. People realised that if they grew crops, harvested and stored them, they would have a better chance of surviving hard times. Where people had tracked animals or travelled with their herds, settled farming became the norm. But not everyone changed their ways. Many people didn't want to settle down, or bad harvests, droughts, floods, war would send them back on the move. In Britain and Ireland, nomadic peoples were probably well established by about 1000 AD. There were the Celtic traveller peoples, the Irish travellers who called themselves the Parvi or Minkers, and across the Irish Sea there were the Scottish travellers, the Norkin. They had their own languages. The Irish travellers talked the Gammon and the Scottish travellers spoke the Bula Ragad. Both have sometimes been called the Cant. Some travellers worked the land. Others were musicians and storytellers who brought entertainment and news to the people of the countryside. Some were horse dealers, tinsmiths and metalworkers. For centuries they lived in tents and travelled mostly on foot. One traditional name for the Irish travellers was Anluch Shul, which means the walking people. Meanwhile, thousands of miles away, a people called the Roma or Romanis had been travelling west, starting from northwest India. The word Roma comes from an old word Rom, meaning man or husband. It isn't related to Rome or Romania, they just look similar. In the late 1400s, a group arrived in Scotland. They were received by King James IV. They told fortunes, had exotic-looking clothes, darker skin and an Indian language, Romani. They stood out from everyone else and were referred to as Egyptians, a word that eventually turned into Gypsies. As time went on, they did much of the same work as other travellers. Some were specialists in other trades, like wickerwork, charcoal burning, even pearl fishing and snake catching. In the 1500s and 1600s, there were some attempts to expel them from the land. In some cases, people were deported across the sea, or even hanged for being gypsies. By the 1700s, Romany Gypsies lived all over Britain. Some families mixed with the travellers who were already here. Down in England and Wales, like elsewhere, most nomads lived in tents made from arched sticks stuck in the ground with canvas on top. But some gypsies and travellers put their tents on flat carts to keep them off the cold, wet ground. The traveller's wagon was born. The bow-top became a common sight in Ireland as well as Britain. Later, wagons were purpose-built in various shapes and sizes. Mobile works of art. Over the years, travellers went back and forth across the Irish Sea and the borders of mainland Britain. Some worked on the canals and motorways, fought in wars for their country, and many became self-employed. They did jobs like scrap metal collecting, roofing, flower selling, and tarmacking, trades you could take on the move, trades that continue today. Romany people from other parts of Europe continued to come, in small numbers at first, with more arriving in the 21st century. So those three words, gypsies, Roma, travellers, they hide a lot of meaning. They get used in lots of ways, but they're just the names of people, like English, Indian, or Italian. Over the years, some travelling people have settled down. Some move less often, and others hardly at all. But however they live, they take their languages, memories, and cultures with them. They are proud of their roots and their family, and why shouldn't they be? After all, if you go back far enough, there's a traveller in every story.
Okay, so normally I'd invite some comments and questions, but I want to keep moving with the presentation. So, but I'd invite people to, if you've got any observations or things you want to share on watching that film, then it'd be really great to see in the chat. And I think also to say, in terms of mental health and well-being, I mean, it's really useful just to see that and start to understand different cultures, and particularly an ethnicity that's often, you know, you don't hear that information about their history. But you will have spotted in the film that there's quite a history of persecution of gypsies and travellers, and unfortunately, you know, we continue to see in our more modern history, including this year, the introduction of the Police Act, and we can't underestimate the impact that has on people, not just roadside families, but also you know, anyone from the community that in effect, you know, it is government legislation to try and eradicate visual representation of gypsies and travellers in our communities and their culture, and to assimilate them to settled ways of life. So that's certainly something we've seen within our staff team and our communities, that, you know, unfortunately, unfortunately a huge impact on people's mental well-being. Something that does have a really positive impact is really looking at that culture and heritage and sharing it and celebrating it. And, you know, when organisations have a very public show of pride and support for gypsies and travellers within West Yorkshire, that does have a really good impact. People don't see it from our discussions with our team. They don't see it as like virtue signalling and stuff. Like, you know, it's a really positive act. So that's something that hopefully, you know, on watching the film, having a think you can do in your organisations, particularly come June when it's History Month. So, yeah, just to say that, so just wanted to also highlight that, you know, it's termed for multiple ethnicities, and that that they are an ethnic group, Romany Gypsies and Irish travellers. So we need to be thinking about that in terms of our delivery of our services and equality law, and that I think in terms of policymakers, like, people put Romani Gypsies and Irish Travellers sort of in under an umbrella of Gypsy, Roma, Traveller, Boater and Show people. That doesn't necessarily mean that on the ground people would mix more commonly in that way, but it can be a helpful sort of tool in terms of taking action. But obviously in terms of our delivery, we should be thinking about people's different ethnicities and not grouping them too much. The reason they are grouped is that their roots are in nomadism. So Bernard, do you want to pick up for us about accommodation, and we'll go into a bit about how that affects people's mental health?
So 1 second. Yeah. So 7,000 gypsies and travellers estimated in West Yorkshire living on local authority provides sites, private sites and roadside encampments. 61% live in houses. You are still a gypsy or traveller if you live in a house. 5 dedicated sites, 200 homes still needed. So so living in a house, the positive for living in a house is the fact that, you know, you've got a fixed address, you've got running water, gas and electric, but you know, the thing is the transition between, like, let's say you've been living roadside most of your life, and the transition that is towards your mental health. So often what you'll find is people that's been living on sites and roadsides most of their life, making that transition's got a big, massive impact on people's mental well-being. People often feel trapped and isolated when they move into houses, and that's something we find when we go out to see people on our suicide prevention project, that one of the main things we find is severe isolation. They're not connected, a lot of the time they're not connected to their own community. So this is one of the main indicators. So roadside, I was brought up roadside myself. The good thing about roadside is you're connected more to your community, and it's good, you know, you've got a sense of culture. You know, the fact that people travel for work as well, so sometimes you might need to travel to different places, as a lot of people self-employed to find work, and it helps regarding that. But you will experience a lot of racism when traveling about, and yeah, you get moved from place to place.
Did you want me to just say a few bits about negotiated stopping? Or
Sorry, I forgot about
No. It's impossible to remember everything, isn't it? Just to say, in terms of like local authority approaches, Leeds is well known for its approach in terms of gypsies and travellers and encampments. It's a much more supportive approach rather than to just evict people. So trying to put in place negotiated stopping agreements so that people can stay on land and the local community knows what to expect and what's been agreed, and certain like codes of conduct, and people are provided with amenities. And obviously that can't be underestimated in terms of what impact it has on people's mental health when it's done well. But obviously, for the most part, particularly in other local authorities, you know, you're looking at enforcement. If you look on websites, on local authority websites about, you know, if you've got gypsies and travellers in your area, you know, you wouldn't want the way that it's phrased to be about your community or any other community. Really, it's still, you know, quite shocking how we treat gypsies and travellers, and how that impacts on their mental health when they're not welcome anywhere and have nowhere to turn in terms of their accommodation, because often people people are travelling sometimes not out of choice, but because they're homeless. So a significant proportion of people are homeless and are waiting for pitches on sites or planning permission for their own yards, but that's also quite fraught with difficulty. So I think, you know, integration of how we think about health and housing and enforcement in terms of mental health is obviously really important.
So the positive thing about living on a site is that the same as living in a house, really. You've got a fixed address. You can take kids get school and they're able to have a good education, running water, the chance to go back to travelling as well if need be for work. Kirklees doesn't unfortunately have any council plots at the moment, sites at the moment, and just the fact that, you know, they've got all them things set up for them. So in the community, mental health is something that's not often talked about within the community, and when it is, it's usually in a negative way, because there is a big stigma within the Gypsy and Traveller community around mental health. Often people might feel ashamed to open up about some of the struggles they're going through regarding the mental health, and so some of the things we do at Leeds GATE often run a men's group to support a number of men and to go out and speak to them in houses and stuff like that. But you know, the biggest thing I think, being somebody from the community, was being able to open up about my personal experience with mental health, low self-esteem, and also low self-esteem and anxiety. So I think that's a big thing for a man from the community, especially, to be able to open up and to say, you know, it's okay to not be okay. It's okay to speak about what you're going through, and to be able to have them conversations, especially with other men, and to be able to, you know, it takes a lot of bravery within the community to be able to, you know, say, listen, you know, just because you're suffering, there's no shame in that, and by turning that on your head, is turning that on its head and seeing it no longer as like a weakness but a strength. For me, it took a lot of courage, but it took it helped me find my own strength and being able to share that story. And it's just about, you know, and with a men's group, I'm trying not to put the emphasis on, you know, mental health, rather it being a men's group, just, you know, so to be focused on the obviously know my job role, and if at some point when they feel like they need them conversations, just being part of a group and being involved in something hands-on, you know, when they build up them trust levels with me, they can have them conversations, and them conversations do come gradually into it. Okay, Grayson. So 85% wouldn't have a traveller. So this is talking about the wider community. So 85% wouldn't have a traveller as a friend, and 78% wouldn't have a traveller as a neighbour. 83% wouldn't employ a traveller. Even 3 days there's a negative news story on national media alone. So yeah, so some of the things because I live in a house now, but throughout my life, like I've suffered a lot of racism, especially while living in a house, often on roadside, and this often did have a big impact on my mental health, and also my low self-esteem and the way I viewed myself, and you know, and it's just about, you know, finding yourself again and to be able to talk and open up about that. So the life expectancy of gypsies and travellers is 50%. For the wider population, it is around 79%. So some of the things that gypsies and travellers, what makes the poor life expectancy poor is the fact that there's a poor diet. Don't think they will be treated fairly as well when accessing services that could be GPs, anything that involves, you know, going to see somebody from, that could be GP, a doctor, you know, because you don't think, if like what I got told when I was little, when I used to walk into anything with my mother was, don't tell them what you are. So a lot of the time you'd have to just not mention what you are. And I think that's why, I think the stats are a lot higher when it comes to like suicide prevention and mental health, but you don't usually, that's something that I got taught. Don't mention what you are, you won't get fair treatment, you know, and this, yeah, that's got a poor impact on your mental health as well. And I think mental health being a big one on people's general health, and a lot of people from the community don't get regular health checks either. And I think, you know, that's just something that I don't know why that is, but you know.
Wondered, Bernard, I just realised that we haven't said anything about the training that you've been developing for the community, yeah. And I just yeah, I think everyone would really love to hear about it.
Yeah. So at the moment, we're delivering, it's like a safe talk training for the community. So we've already been working around this, and we've done like a bit of a run through with 6 members already, and we got a bit of a feedback on developing. And what people said was they wanted me to take a bit more of a role on that, because we had a video already that was done with 2 members that wasn't from the community. So the idea of the video was me and Duncan from Humans Being had a little bit of a practice session, and then we run through like a training scenario between, it's like between from a member of the community, from the member of the Gypsy and Traveller community, and somebody that's not from the community, and it's done in a more you know, in a way that's, you know, the first thing is we have a safe talk conversation about all the things that you can miss. So it's like talking over the top of somebody, not saying the right things, being told to man up and all that. And then the next part is the safe talk bit where, you know, you say all the things that's right, like listening, and like giving them all that support. And there's a few videos that we've developed on that, and I think it's very good for the fact that, you know, it's done. Some of the language I use is the way somebody from my community would talk. Like I don't use the words like bad nerves and like anxiety. A lot of gypsies might not know what anxiety means. We'll use the words bad nerves instead. Like if you talk to somebody from the community and said, you know, are you anxious? We wouldn't really know what that means, because we always use the word anxiety. Because I've really got a good understanding of mental health. I never had a good understanding of mental health growing up. But the second part being also that I share my lived experience on there as well. So we've got a part where I talk about all the negative parts towards that journey and what it was like suffering from suicide ideation and attempted suicide, but then the support that I received after. And it's for people from the community to see that, you know, you can get out of that just because you're in that at that moment, and you think, you know, because I felt like I was at a dead end. I felt like, you know, I didn't want to live anymore, and I felt like I had nowhere to turn, nobody to talk to. I was very ashamed within the community. But when I go through my story, I talk about like all the negatives, but on the other side of that, all the positives about access and support, group therapy. You know, I think Andy's man club is very good, and anything like that where men can come together and talk about how they feel and to be able to access that support.
Can I just add to that training? This was this project we're doing, is suicide prevention project. It's a 2-year project. And the original plan was to go on the official Safe Talk training, which me, Bernard and Claire did, and was to kind of follow their process and deliver that. But as we kind of went along, we'd realised it had been delivered in the past to some of our members, and we asked for some feedback on what they thought. The feedback we got, they felt it was too heavy. Obviously, there's lots of essential bits in there that we need to use, but thought that was too heavy. So that's when we kind of think about how we could develop to make our kind of in-house suicide prevention training as relevant as possible, to be at a level that everyone can understand within the community. So obviously we're taking elements out of the Safe Talk training and develop this in-house. And like I say, we delivered it the other week to 6 members. Obviously helping people to identify the signs, the risk indicators that make someone more risk at suicide, and then equipping them with the confidence and skills to recognise the signs and have that conversation. Obviously, the hardest bit is being able to saying someone, are we talking about suicide? That's the feedback we got, that asking that question would be difficult. So it's the kind of normalising that. And the feedback we've got really, because it was about what happens when you've got someone to that safety. So you've got someone there and then to ring the crisis service, ring the police, whatever. But the reality of within the community, it's so family orientated that the people that, so what happens next though? Because we live this day in, day out, we would never stop supporting someone that might be, sharing that they're feeling suicide every single day. So we've added another element to that training about what happens next, what other support is over there, the long term rather than just the short term. So it's been a big work in progress in this training, and obviously we're ready to deliver that hopefully next week to our women's group.
And I'm not going to bring the presentation back up, but the final bit that we were going to talk about was education. So I'll just touch on that because it does link very much into what was just being said about Safe Talk and other ways of approaching gypsies and travellers about mental health. So literacy is often quite low, particularly among older generations. So we need to think about that in terms of our delivery and support of people, and also training, making sure that that's much more emphasis on the verbal rather than the written. We do have concerns from our young people and they said, and their grown-ups, got my head in, and our members about young people being at school and the racism and exclusion that they face, and after seeing other children in the community take their own lives, like worry about, in some occasions, certainly not all, but sometimes worry about their children's exposure to racism, and then keeping them more closely in the family unit is safer, and electively home education, they face sometimes with quite an impossible choice. And also obviously people from the community will often finish their education after primary school, and some of that is about people having different values and cultural norms, and I guess our education system doesn't really support that. So people put value on skills within the family and in the community, and practical skills, which is really positive. But obviously in terms of suicide, in terms of people's indicators, can have a big impact on their ability to earn. Though obviously, as we've seen, it can be quite difficult if you want to go into the workplace anyway, because often there's quite hostile views there. We are working really hard with other organisations to open up and improve access to education, so that people who want to stay in education can do. And we have like a boys group and a girls group, and we support a lot of young people who are electively home educated. But as you can probably appreciate, if the family members may not be literate themselves, then that home education can be quite challenging. There's a limit to what we can do at Leeds GATE. because of we'd need to be Ofsteded and register if we kind of deliver too much. So it's great when we can work in partnership with other organisations to provide really like educationally enriching opportunities for our young people, and obviously really benefits their mental health as well. So really, you know, interested to hear of any partnerships that are open to us there. We've got a little bit of time, so great to just open it up to comments and questions, and like a huge thank you to Bernard. Like it's a lot to have to share your trauma, and you know, great to hear your presentation today, Bernard. Thank you.